If you ever find footprints in the forest longer than 40 centimeters, stay quiet. Don't make a sound, because that's not a giant man. It's something else, and it might be closer than you think. This creature had a disturbing habit. It would stand behind a tree and watch its prey for hours without moving, without making a sound, barely even breathing. Then, the moment you let your guard down, a 3-meter-tall shadow would emerge and be on top of you before you could react. A single hand could crush your ribs. Here's something even stranger. In 2015, an archaeological team discovered a cave in Yunnan province containing 28 human skulls, all of them shattered, with teeth marks scattered around them. Scientists pieced together what likely happened. A group of early humans had been driven into that cave, believing they'd found safety. Instead, the creature waited at the entrance and pulled them out one by one. Claw marks were later found scratched into the cave walls. Desperate attempts by people trying to climb higher, out of reach. But the creature's arms stretched nearly 2.7 meters, long enough to reach every corner. No one survived that night, and this terror lasted for nearly 2 million years, until the creature vanished and humans could finally leave the caves without fear. So what happened to it? How did something so dominant simply disappear? In January 2024, the journal Nature published findings that solved the mystery. A team from the Chinese Academy of Sciences spent 10 years running 157 measurements using 6 different dating techniques. Their conclusion? This creature wasn't wiped out by humans, predators, or any natural disaster. It destroyed itself. The discovery. In 1935, Dutch paleontologist Ralph von Koenigswald was browsing a traditional pharmacy in Hong Kong, where animal bones were sold as dragon bones for medicine. Among them, he found a tooth larger than an egg. His hands were shaking. This could be evidence of the largest primate to ever walk the earth. He named the species Gigantopithecus. Then history intervened. World War II broke out, and Koenigswald was placed in an internment camp. To protect the fossil, his wife hid the tooth inside a milk bottle and buried it in a friend's garden at night. It stayed buried for 3 years. Only after the war did Koenigswald dig it back up. But the real treasure turned out to be in China. In 1956, farmers in Guangxi province were digging for bat guano to use as fertilizer when their hose struck something solid, a massive lower jawbone. Scientists later recovered more than 1,000 giant teeth from the site in what came to be known as Giant Ape Cave. Strangely, despite finding nearly 2,000 teeth and 4 lower jawbones, researchers never found a skull, spine, ribs, or limb bones. That means almost everything we know about this animal's appearance is inference. Every reconstruction you've seen online is an educated guess. The only certainty is its size. Scientists estimate Gigantopithecus stood at least 3 meters tall and weighed around 300 kilograms. For comparison, the largest gorillas alive today reach just under 1.8 meters. A child by comparison. A gentle giant? Here's the twist. Despite its size, this 3-meter giant was a herbivore. Tooth analysis shows its diet consisted mainly of fruit, bamboo, and leaves. But don't let that fool you into thinking it was harmless. A bear's teeth are far larger than a lion's, and bears are famously territorial. An angry Gigantopithecus could have torn apart anything in its path. Our ancestors lived in its shadow for over 1 million years. Homo erectus arrived in Southeast Asia around 1.5 million years ago. But Gigantopithecus had already been there for nearly 2 million years. Meaning the two species coexisted in the same forests for at least 1 million years. Picture it. A group of early humans, barely 1.5 meters tall, hearing the trees shake as a 3-meter black shadow rises up in the distance. That primal fear may still be wired into us today. Some researchers believe it's part of why large, shadowy figures in the dark trigger such a deep, instinctive fear in humans, even now. What actually killed them? The answer lies in the details. Between 2 million and 700,000 years ago, Southeast Asia was covered in tropical rainforest, rich with the fruit trees Gigantopithecus depended on. It was paradise. Chemical traces in its teeth and gums show a rich diet of figs, leaves, ginger, and flowers, more varied than what modern pandas eat today. Populations were stable, and the species dominated the forest. But starting around 700,000 years ago, the climate began to shift. Not through sudden catastrophe, but through a slow, quiet, and ultimately fatal change. Seasons became more pronounced. Rainforests gradually gave way to drier woodland and open grassland. The fruit Gigantopithecus relied on became scarcer, replaced by low-nutrient trees and grasses. Faced with this, 2 related species took very different paths. One relative, the ancestor of today's orangutans, made what looked like a humbling but ultimately smart adaptation. They started eating whatever was available, however low in nutrition: roots, bark, coarse fibers, and even evolved to be smaller so they could climb higher and range farther in search of food. That choice let them survive to this day. Gigantopithecus refused, not because it couldn't adapt, but because it wouldn't. Chemical evidence in its teeth shows that even as food became scarce, it kept trying to find the fruit it was used to, only switching to low-quality alternatives when there was truly nothing else. It never adapted to eating roots and bark as a primary food source, and it never left the shrinking forest for the open grassland. Signs of chronic nutritional stress appear in its teeth in the later fossil record. Its diet became more varied out of necessity, but its body size never shrank. If anything, it stayed large. For 2 million years, being big and strong had been a winning strategy. But that same strength became a trap. Malnutrition led to lower birth rates and higher infant mortality, and the population entered a downward spiral it couldn't escape. In its final stretch, chronic hunger and stress caused individuals to shrink and their range to narrow, until the species that had ruled the rainforest for 2 million years quietly went extinct. So Gigantopithecus wasn't killed by humans, it gave up its own chance at survival. A legend that lingers. Here's an interesting postscript. Why do so many cultures have legends of giant, hairy, human-like creatures in the forest? Bigfoot in North America, the Yeti in the Himalayas, the wild man of China's Shenangjia forest, the Yowie in the Australian bush. Some researchers speculate these legends may be distant cultural echoes of Gigantopithecus. Even though the species went extinct roughly 300,000 years ago, the fear it once inspired may still be etched somewhere in our collective memory. Gigantopithecus leaves us with a 2-million-year lesson. On this planet, power alone has never guaranteed survival. Adaptability does, and this story keeps repeating itself. The species that seem strongest, most successful, and most unshakable are often the ones that collapse when their environment changes, because they're too attached to their old way of life, too confident in past success, too unwilling to let go of what made them powerful in the first place. Meanwhile, the ones that seem weaker and more willing to compromise often find a way through. So the next time you're walking through a forest and feel like something's watching you, don't worry. It's not the ghost of Gigantopithecus. That creature has been gone for hundreds of thousands of years. What you should really ask yourself is this: are you becoming the next Gigantopithecus? Strong, proud, stubborn, and marching step by step toward your own extinction by refusing to change? Because history has shown us that it doesn't take a war to wipe out a species. Sometimes all it takes is one harmless-looking choice, repeated long enough, and a king is left behind forever, frozen in the fossil record. Thanks for watching.